My eyes opened, and at first all I saw was a gray haze. Then a black and white picture of a hospital gurney took shape next to me. Beyond it, a wall decorated with a butterfly motif. A sheet was pulled over a vaguely pony-shaped mound, a mound missing its legs. Black and white gave way to grainy color, and I stared at the pink splotches on the sheet, matching the wings of the butterflies on the wall. A cable trailed from the covered head to my own temple. A dark tan earth pony stood next to some equipment that beeped and bubbled. His hoof disappeared under the sheets. She's sedated. We can make the transfer.
Pickled pony is best pony,
growled a familiar voice. I slowly turned and looked up at the cybernetic sand dog, Rover. He snorted.
Pony is awake. Pony should still be sleeping.
I felt hooves on my shoulder and feathers tickling my side softly. Welcome back, Glory said in my ear before she bit the cable and gently pulled it out. I felt something tickle behind my eyeball as it was removed. Oh, that sense of wrongness was kicking in. These legs didn't feel like my legs. They felt like enormous complicated booties glued to my body. I kicked and rolled off the table, and my body moved on its own and put its hooves down. Of course, I fought it and went rolling across the concrete floor. Alarms and alerts flashed in my vision. This was bad. This didn't feel like me. Every movement I make felt awkward. I flailed on my back. I finally just stopped and looked at everyone as they eyed me. My friends all stared at me in shock. I could see their faces as clearly as if I was looking at them through a scope. Fear and worry. I gasped, and yet my heart didn't thunder in my chest. My pulse didn't pound in my ears. My body felt unnaturally quiet and still as I stared at them.
Pony is so dramatic,
Rover snorted, rolling his green eyes before returning to the sheet-covered mare.
Dr. Pony, Pegasus Pony, best we work now, or only have scraps left.
P-21 trotted towards me, kneeling. Blackjack? I jerked again, my mechanical hooves driving me back and bouncing over the floor. I fought it, which resulted in me rolling over. My flailing limbs caught him in the gut, blasting the wind out of him. Stay back, I shouted. I have no idea what's going on. Why was my body trying to do? My random rolling knocked over a table. Hopefully I hadn't broken anything. There's no way to operate a surgical environment, the brown buck said behind his operating mask. I managed to rise to my hooves, but it was tough trying to learn to walk. My brain kept sending signals that my legs weren't following right. So I'd move, then I'd correct, then overcorrect the overcorrection, and then land on my face. I didn't walk out of the surgery so much as repeatedly fall over in the general direction of the door. Finally out, in something that looked more like a recovery area than an operating room, I found a corner and collapsed in it. Error flashed over and over in my vision. That seemed to sum up everything in me right now. Rampage, P-21, and Scotch trotted over to me. I wanted to gasp, but my lungs didn't gasp. I wanted my heart to race, but it didn't beat at all. They stared at me. P-21, in pain as he held his gut. Rampage stepped closer. Blackjack. I closed my eyes, then looked at her again. A targeting icon appeared on her head. Then I looked over at P-21 and watched the blue crosshairs lock onto his head as well. And Scotch. I clenched my eyes shut. It was the only way we could save your life, Scotch said softly. Sorry I lied, she added as her ears folded back. I looked at her and gave her a small smile. Alive. I was alive. My friends had worked their asses off to save my life. I could see. I could, at least in theory, walk without feeling like a cripple. I'd been given a second chance. So why was I so upset? Would I seriously have preferred being dead to this? I'd been given a second shot. Was this really how I was going to treat it? Slowly, I opened my eyes again, and thankfully they weren't throwing targets all over the place anymore. Things still felt off. a sort of nagging discomfort where my shoulders and hips met my body. It didn't hurt, exactly. More like my brain wasn't sure what to make of it. At least my mutated limbs had been a part of me. Now it felt like half my body was wrong. But I'd gotten used to faking it. No problem, Scotch. I probably would have freaked out horribly if you'd told me the truth, I said as I tried to hug myself. Again, my legs went wonky and jerked spasmodically.
We weren't sure you'd make it,
Rampage said with a little frown.
We were hours away from Manhattan when your heart stopped. Rover had some pipes Glory was able to jam to my chest, and yours to keep everything from going inside you. Thrush set a new speed record, and once we were at the tower, Lacuna got the army outside to let us in.
She jerked her head towards the window.
Red Eye probably has 1,000 troops surrounding the place, but apparently no pony messes with Alicorns around here. They stepped aside, easy as you please. Then she stayed behind. Said the tower wouldn't be friendly to her.
P-21 nodded. They almost didn't let Rover and Rampage in.
They insisted that we turn over all our ammunition,
the armored mare said as she looked at her. Hoofclaws.
I think they realized at that point that that was a mistake in their security policy. Actually, I think they were going to shoot me on general principle. Can you imagine? Nearly had to commit a bloodbath just to be allowed inside, she said with a little pout. Fortunately, they reconsidered when I shot myself in the head in front of them. For some reason, that just cut right through all the arguments.
Somewhere in Tenpony, I was sure the head of security was either taking antacids or shots of hard liquor. Possibly both. I made myself smile. Tell me you behaved yourself? The three of them relaxed, clearly. I hoped that meant that they didn't see me trying to squirm out of my own limbs. She inhaled and rolled her eyes.
Please. One pony did say something about zebras and filthiness, but when I asked him to elaborate, he suddenly remembered an appointment,
Rampage said as she tapped her chin.
There may have been claws on tile, too. Hard to say.
You're on Mentals again, aren't you? P-21 asked her flatly.
I've been out for days. I finally got to replace my stock.
She giggled as she bounced on her hooves in a very glittery circle.
These Tenpony guys always have the nicest shit.
Yeah, well, they provided the very nice hospital to put me back together again, I said as I looked at the clinic. What about Rover? I couldn't imagine being in a tower full of ponies was good for the old dog. He's staying out of sight. He doesn't like ponies, and ponies don't like him. Apparently, when Zodiac asked him to do the surgery, he was quite something, P-21 said as he looked back into the operating room. He wanted to make sure she was taken care of. I guess there aren't many folk in Equestria like them. When Glory used your broadcaster, she got help from all over the hoof, Scotch said with a grin. Sure, Sanguine made his snotty offer, but so did the professor. Well, not snotty in her case. Dusty Trail sent a box of gems straight quick. Bottlecap didn't have any parts, but she said the vendors took up a collection for when you were better. Hell, even Caprice sent you a whole case of quality chems, plus every chunk of Deus she could find. Apparently, she only sold Zodiac the back half and was still trying to figure out what the front end was really worth. You mean I have pieces of Deus in me? No wonder my insides felt off. I could almost hear tiny metal parts inside me screaming, "Cunt." A few. Apparently she had to extract some sort of metal stuff to strengthen your bones. Or what used to be your bones. And there are some other parts in there too. She replies softly, not quite understanding my reaction. But then she hadn't been chased halfway across the hoof by him. Pieces of Deus. Pieces of the Professor. Is there anything that's left that's original? I muttered, looking at my hooves and tapped them together idly. Can't you just be happy to be alive? P-21 asked with a little frown. A lot of people went to help you. I smiled at his stern tone and looked up at him. He flushed, rubbing his bushy blue mane as he looked away. You're right. It's a lot to get used to. A target locked onto his head, and I closed my eyes tight. A lot to get used to. Speaking of broadcasters, where's my pip buck? P-21 reached over, took my left hoof, and pressed on a plate. It slid away, and there was a familiar screen. It's built in now. You don't need to cover it up anymore. They'd have to take your leg off to get it now, Rampage said with a grin. Then she frowned and rubbed her chin. Of course, I'm pretty sure Psycho Shy and Sanguine wouldn't have a problem with that, so I wouldn't get too comfy. Right, I chuckled mirthlessly. Comfy. Blackjack? What's wrong? Scotch asked. I sighed and closed my eyes, tapping my head against the wall. Nothing, Scotch. Just been through a lot, I said as I tried to sort out my emotions. All this help, all this attention. I was nothing special. Even if what the professor said was true, I didn't deserve it. I looked at her sitting there with her head bowed. And none of it was your fault, understand? She sniffed again and nodded, pressing her hind legs together tightly. Well, I got some news you might like, Rampage said as she used a tone that promised that, if I didn't like it, she was going to do something unpredictable to me. Big Daddy's alive, and for the first thing he did was thump the gangs into pulling back. He's got your eye patch, somehow. Not sure if he lost an eye in the shelling or if he just likes the look, though. The peace is holding. It's been 3 days, and DJ Pony hasn't announced any new killing. She looked at me with a cool smile. Oh, and for blowing up the Celestia, you're a Reaper now, whether you want to be one or not. They're scrubbing out Daze's room for you. Well, so long as everyone understands that I'm one lousy Reaper, I said as I closed my eyes, then frowned and peeked, catching the three of them giving me a rather skeptical glance. I gave a stern look, and all of them blinked and grinned. Absolutely. Blackjack, worst Reaper ever, Rampage said, and Scotch nodded quickly along with her. P-21 chuckled. Things are a little messier on the Steel Ranger side. Apparently, the entire order has gone crazy. A group of them actually attacked the Stable Dweller's stable. And then there was Rain's shelling. Some nasty business elsewhere. The whole thing's blown up all over their faces, though. And apparently, Crunchy Carrots didn't make it. Good thing, or she'd probably be shot for having lost their base. Stronghoof rallied the survivors, but he needs somewhere to operate from. What about Steel Rain's followers? No idea. He left things a mess when he died, but their whole order is screwed up at the moment, P-21 said with a shrug. They don't even know if he drowned or got vaporized when the Celestia blew. So, I said as I rubbed my head, that leaves the Enclave, Red Eye, the Zebras, and their tank. Actually, I don't think that was their tank, Rampage said as she fished out another Menthol from her pouch. It was striped? Scotch Tape said, wisely omitting the duh. Rampage rolled her pink eyes. I mean that, while that was a Zebra Behemoth-class tank, I doubt it was fighting for just the Zebras. The three of us looked confused as she popped a Menthol into her mouth and chewed. No pony knows heavy armor like that on a bunch of infantry. It's stupid. They just scatter and call in air support, artillery, or more armor of their own. If we're a Zebra tank, I'd like to kick the shit out of their commander for not using the fire team to pin us down. 2 sniper teams and we'd have been dead meat. Or a melee specialist unit. Twist? I asked softly. She smiled at me, then blinked. What? Just making sure I know who I'm talking to, I said as I glanced at P-21 and Scotch.